Okay, so if we were to start conceptual modeling, the way I would approach it for this one, remember we had those initial set of requirements and then some additional context from the interviewer. So what I would do is first do a conceptual model with the initial requirements, and then from there, I would extend that to bring in the additional context we got from the interviewers, just so I can sort of, if I do that initial step first, I can sort of get a reaction from the interviewer and have something a little bit simpler to work on first. And then once I sort of gauge the interviewer's reaction and see that, okay, I'm on the right track, I can bring that additional complexity in. And then in the future steps, I'm just going to do all of it at once. Okay, so for conceptual modeling, this is probably a review, but we want to ask ourselves what entities we want to keep track of and how do they relate to each other. And you saw before we sort of started thinking about that, where there's entities, there's books and there's transactions that occur with them. There's members that are doing the transaction. So, okay, I sort of have a picture in my mind. And from here, I'm basically ready to start whiteboarding. Okay, so here we are at the whiteboard. And again, we're basically just going to take our initial set of requirements that you see up there on the left side. And we're going to create an initial conceptual model from that. And then we're going to take it and extend it to bring in the additional requirements that we got when we asked those clarifying questions to the interviewer. Okay, so we'll basically start from the top down, right? So it says library can contain multiple copies of the same book. Okay, so multiple copies of the same book. So it sounds like you're going to have a book. Remember, kind of thinking ahead, we realize there's also going to be magazines. So instead of calling it a book, let's call it a product. So you're going to have a product that's either a book or a magazine, and then there's going to be multiple copies of it. So the way I would model this is, so maybe what you can do is, let's say we have one entity and we'll call it a product. Okay, so that's our product entity. And so that will be, that will tell us what product we have. And then to track multiple instances, we'll have what's called a product item. And that's going to track the multiple instances of the book or magazine or whatever it is. And then we can kind of do this right away. We're like, what do we think the relationship is going to be between them? So they're likely going to be, and so we kind of already said it, that one product is going to have multiple instances of a product item. So one product will always have multiple instances, and one instance will only be connected to one product. So that's going to be our lower and upper bound, like we did right there. And then we can think about what's going to be the lower bound of a product. So what I'm going to say is that if the library is keeping track of a product, that means they have at least one copy of it. So we're going to keep that as one as our lower bound. So one product will have a one-to-many. So product to product item is going to be one-to-many relationship. Okay, and then kind of going down the list, library tracks copies which are checked out. So checked outs are the transactions that we were talking about occurring, but we can honestly just call them checkouts. So let's call it item checkouts. Item checkouts is going to be, and let me actually just move it so you can see it a little better. I'm going to put that out of the way. Okay, so yeah, so you have item checkouts is going to be what the instances where someone checks something out. Okay, so that's going to be another entity. And kind of from what we have so far, we know that an item is what's going to be checked out. So there's going to be a relationship like that. A checkout is always going to have some item that was checked out. So it's going to be a one. And we'll say one record will track one checkout. And we obviously know like a product is going to be, someone's going to check something out, it's going to be returned, someone else is going to check it out. So an item can have multiple checkouts, right? So that's going to be the upper bound, like this. Now what's the lower bound? So you could end up having copies in a library that's never checked out. You could have 10 copies of a book. Let's say it's unpopular, so certain copies are never checked out. So what you can do is we're going to have that 0 as our lower bound. Okay. Keep moving on. The historical record of how many times a book's been checked out. That's sort of taken care of already with the item checkouts entity that we just created. So we're kind of good. Seems like we're kind of good there. Keep going down. Library has members who can check out the books. So, okay. So I want to keep track of members. So that's going to be a member entity. Member. This icon. Yeah, so I'm going to keep track of members. So that's going to be my entity. And so the member is the one who's doing the checkout. So there's going to be some relationship like that. So now what can we say that? A checkout, we kind of know that a checkout is always going to have a member. Someone is going to check. If something's been checked out, it's a member who did it. So a checkout will always have one, and that's going to be the lower and upper bound. You're not going to have multiple in one record in the item checkouts table. It's only going to be related to one member. So it's always going to be the lower and upper, because if multiple people check the same item out, that's going to be two different records in item checkouts. So, okay, we're good there. So a member can obviously check out multiple books or multiple products. So that's going to be our many. Now, what's the lower bound? So probably not realistic, but you could have people who get a membership and never check out items. So maybe something like an employee who never checks out books. So that's something that is possible. So we'll have that as our lower bound. Okay. And so this one, kind of going to review, step back, and it seems like I'm pretty good where, so this is basically our initial conceptual model where we have our entities from our initial requirements and we're keeping track. And so again, if we created our entities, so this is kind of what we created, right? We have products that tracks a book that tracks books or magazines or what have you that exists. Product item is going to track the individual copies. Item checkouts contains a record of the books being checked out. Members are the ones who check out books, and members and product. Yeah. So then this one point here. So member and product item have a many-to-many relationships with item checkouts being the junction table. So what that means here is that this is what basically has the many. So we remember we had that requirement of there being at least one many-to-many relationship. So there is a many-to-many relationship here between member and product item, but we have item checkouts here that's basically serving as the junction table to connect them. Okay, so this is pretty much our initial ERD. And what I would do at this point is basically go on to extend it and bring in those additional requirements that we had, right?